Here. Okay. All right. We'll let the people gather. We'll let them join the channel. I'm going to wave at some people here. Hello, hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Wait, is that an original Monet in the background?
I painted it myself.
Paint by numbers.
Yes.
Like an old person in Central Park.
Is that a Phoenix University diploma behind you?
It's my wife's master's degree, but
Oh, okay.
it's not mine. Let's see if we can get up to 5. Now we're at 5.
5 watchers?
6 watchers.
There we go.
We're not even at the top of the hour. There's like a lineup to get in. It's like the hottest club on Instagram. Corporate Instagram.
How you doing?
I'm good.
What week is this for you?
Losing track. We bailed on we'll call it NBA cancellation day.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was a Wednesday 3 weeks ago this Wednesday. And
today is the official start of our 4th week.
oh wow. You got a head start.
We did.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have earbud?
No.
Okay. That's fine. That's right.
You can hear though, and I can hear you, right?
Sure can. All right. Well, let's kick in. We promised the people a 2 o'clock start. Knowing Jason, we always start on time. He's a very punctual gentleman. I want to welcome all our guests to this Tuesday edition of Instagram Live. This is also an episode of Hashtag Finance, which is our podcast, our now 102nd episode, I believe this will end up being. And Jason is the executive vice president at OTC Markets Group in New York. New York City, as we all know, is in the heart of the corona epidemic. It's also the heart of the financial system in America, which is making for an interesting boiling, I guess, gathering place of things. So first thing, I just want to check in, Jason, you're my friend. More than anything, I just want to know how you're doing. How are things in Manhattan right now, where I assume you're sitting in your apartment?
I'm sitting at home. Things are, well, thanks for asking, and hopefully you guys are okay up there as well. Things are a little surreal. Fortunately, all my friends and family are healthy. And, you know, we as a company took the very early decision to have people work from home. So in retrospect, that was the right thing to do. I'm entering my 4th week working from my dining room table. It's interesting. The streets, you know, I live right in the heart of Manhattan and the streets are empty. The park is empty. The streets are empty. There's no traffic. But, you know, we're survivors here in New York. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. So we are working from home. My whole team, I'm proud and privileged and honored to be working with such a great group of people who are professionals. They're all healthy as well. Yeah. And, you know, we operate like you, a financial market. So we have to be up and running. We're systemically significant. We don't have the option of shutting down our business. We can do it from home, and we have the systems and the capability to do that. And but first and foremost, we're humans, and so we have to keep our staff healthy and safe. And so we've been able to do all of those things, which is a testament to some really great people, quite honestly.
Yeah, and if you were, I just want to lean into that one part. You guys are in your 4th week. That would have been at the time a pretty progressive decision to make based on what I experienced, because we jumped ship around, like I said, 3 weeks this Wednesday, and that was kind of just at the front end of everyone basically evacuating Bay Street. Were people in New York taking steps at that point, or was that just you guys kind of honing in on like this is a big deal based on prior situations, perhaps 9/11 or 2000, not 2008, but 9/11? You know, you guys kind of had a sense for it, or just walk me through that.
Yeah, I think so. I think we as a company probably were a week ahead of even where the city was or the state or the country was in thinking of this. And part of that, quite honestly, is because I had been traveling. And so you know, it comes down to some silly things. I was in Europe, been on a business trip to Denmark and Norway. When I left, everybody told me I was crazy, but like everybody else, you kind of like, well, it's a China thing or whatever. I got back on a Sunday, and that Monday, the 9th, came into the office, and we all realized that, you know, there was a discomfort around that, generally speaking, that should I have even come in? Should I be putting other people at risk? Am I putting other people at risk? Nobody knows where other people, you know, we're an office of 100 people or whatever it is, and you don't know what people do on the weekends or where their families have been or where they're going. And I think there was we certainly had some people in our office that were concerned, so they were kind of waving the flag. And, you know, from our point of view, we were set up to function more or less with non-essential personnel being able to VPN into the office, to be able to work from home. We were fortunate in that respect. And so we took the early decision that non-essential employees, it was better safe than sorry. And we're able to kind of use that first week actually to work out some of the kinks that other people had to kind of were forced to do. So we're veterans, grizzled old veterans at working from home.
Oh, you don't have to convince me. So what tools are you guys using to keep in touch? What's sort of your go-to toolkit for internal and external communications?
Yeah, so we don't want to put any plugs for anything, but we've got Microsoft Teams. Is certainly kind of our go-to in our suite of being able to effectively communicate, to be able to real-time talk to each other, to have internal phone conversations, external meetings. You know, we use like everybody else, every once in a while, Zoom comes into play. But look, like I said, we're a financial market, so we have regulations that require that we have uptime, right? We can't just not function. And so whether it's our VPN capabilities for people to be able to log in, remote access, and all of those things, those systems have been in place for years, and they've worked individually as people have taken holiday or individual work from home days. But it was good to see that they keep us all connected. So, you know, I'm able to log into, like you, my email, my Excel folders and files, all of the tools that we need to work. I can get right here in the dining room. I might never have to go to work again. If it wasn't for social interaction, this would be the place to be.
Yeah. Well, in part of your travels, last time I saw you was in Switzerland, and we were very close to Italy. So it was, man, times have changed. So speaking of times changing, we've seen a market unlike any other in history. And, you know, the only thing you can do is look past at similar situations. You can look back at 2008, 2001. You can look at the tech crisis as well. But how all this volatility, you know, but not necessarily the volume you saw in 2008. What are you making of this? Are people reacting to this in a rational way right now? Or are we just, because we're dealing with something that's so undefinable, a virus that is basically, it's a black swan event. It comes, you know, every 100 years type of thing. The last reference point is maybe the Spanish flu, back when people were trading on the stock market with chalk probably. I mean, what do you make of this? Is there any reference point for it that you can at least base some sensible judgment upon?
You know, I think no is the answer. I was involved very intimately in 2008, and I think, you know, people were predicting that it was there was a credit issue, you know, and the financial markets had clearly gotten out of hand in 2008. Obviously 9/11 was a one-time event. I think if you look at this event, from my point of view, there are a couple of things. First of all, even leading up to Corona, the market was a little crazy. And you and I tend to deal a lot in the small cap space. And if you kind of took the long tail of the S&P, those companies weren't doing exceptionally well, right? If you pull out the top 5 or 6 companies in the S&P, everybody else was kind of, dithering around a little bit. And so you already had, I think, a market where it was a little overvalued, where small caps were not keeping up with Apple and the Facebooks of the world. I think then this happens, and so there's a natural adjustment, because then you see that the market might be a little overvalued, and you see that this is almost kind of the rock falling over the other side of the mountain, and you see that the small caps and the long tail of the S&P are going to have extra trouble. Overlay on that oil, and all the problems that are happening with oil. Overlay on that just closing down the entire economy, and it's just not something that you will ever see. And I think you see that by 3.3 million people filing for unemployment in 1 week. Even at the worst week of 2008, it was just under 700,000. And so I don't know that people have kind of a point of reference for this, and don't know how long this is going to go. You see some people saying, oh, it'll be a V curve, and once we come out of this, the economy will be roaring. I tend to be a little more pessimistic, just because there are so many downstream effects of this that it's going to take a long time. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I think we're in uncharted territory.
Well, it was a vague question by design, because I don't even know how to position what's going on necessarily. But other than just to say, based on your experience of which you have, especially through 2008, how do you even rationalize what's going on? And you kind of can't. You just gotta ride it out a little bit. And I haven't been out driving for a few days, and I haven't.
You should, because oil is cheap.
I was going to say, I don't even know. I filled up my tank at like 65 cents Canadian the other day. So I got a full tank. I got to start filling up jerry cans just to hoard the stuff, I guess.
Exactly.
But that's a lot of lawnmower trips, or mowing the lawn this summer, which I really don't want to do. Well, that's interesting. So how are you guys working with clients? So at CSE, we have over 530 listed issuers. You guys have thousands. How are you working with them to maintain not just connectivity to you guys, but to reach their investor audience? I mean, a big part of being listed is that transparency, exposure that we lend these companies. How are you helping them continue to interact with current and potential investors?
Yeah, so we're probably similar to you, right? We're taking a two-prong approach here, because there's the tradability of a security, there's the being listed and all the rules and regulations that go with that, and then there's the visibility. So certainly from the trading perspective, from the being listed and our rules and regulations, we're offering relief. We recognize it's a tough time, so companies are, might be delinquent in their filing, or companies might be coming below the, our minimum bid price requirements. So we're offering relief from that in the short term. So you have an extension to your filing deadlines. We'll give you relief or a longer period of time to get above our minimum bid price requirements for trading on our market, those types of things. So I think it's important for companies, it is important to be out there talking to your investors and focusing on keeping your business going, and you don't need the added pressure of your stock exchange or your market kind of kicking you off. And I think we're, like you and like all the other exchanges, are following that protocol. From a visibility perspective, we're actually, trying to do a lot. So we announced, we've talked before, the end of last year, end of 2018, beginning of last year, we acquired something called the Virtual Investor Conference Series from PR Newswire. That's a way that helps issuers interact with their investors kind of real time, sitting at home. And it's not just like this. It's not just a Zoom call with an investor. It's an entire conference atmosphere that allows you to access over 72,000 investors. You can present live. There's live Q&A. There's an online kind of booth set up, like in a conference, where you can upload videos and your financials and kind of have all that interaction with investors. We're doing we're amping up our podcast series for our OTCQB companies. Typically we'll put out podcasts every couple of weeks to keep it fresh. We're getting in front of that and trying to get more content and give issuers the ability to get more stuff out now when it's needed most. We have an alliance with Proactive, similar to you, so trying to get video content out so our investors can tell their stories rather than go into the traditional studio, the TV studios that we have in our office and you have in yours, doing it virtually through Zoom and trying to help our issuers that way. And then really doing things like this, taking to social. I mean, we have so many great companies that are doing so many great things. Many of them are on the forefront of this virus. And so where we can to bring our social media presence to bear to help project those stories out for our issuers, we have a team of people, a great team of people that's making sure that we do that as well.
Yeah, usually these solutions, they come through the public market companies, publicly listed companies. And, you know, it's good to shine a light on them as best as you can. And my impression is, you know, we're learning in real time how people now want to be communicated with. So today on Instagram, this is great. It's live. It's an ability for people to ask questions, which I should mention you can do down below. There's a little question thing. Ask Jason or myself questions as this drags on. But yeah, I'm curious to know what new habits and what new tools we're going to adopt once this all clears up. Are we going to just decide that, you know, from here on out, we don't need to have staff on site for a full work week? Are we going to decide that, you know, we're going to put more of our own resources into promoting companies digitally and giving them broader reach, as opposed to trying to fill a hotel ballroom or something like that? And you know, we'll see. But I don't know about you, but I've already decided. I think the frequency of content. Not getting so concerned about production quality because that's really important, but to a certain extent, there's diminishing return. And now understanding that if you got a well-crafted message, you can get it on these channels. The quality is actually pretty darn good. Are you seeing the same thing? Are you feeling the same way?
I am. I think you have to be a little cautious because you can be over content, right? I mean, if you're pumping too many things out over social media channels, you just, you know, you're lost, or it gets lost. So I think that's what we're learning, right? What's the right velocity of things? How do you target the right people? You know, I don't know that it's enough just to blast out stuff to everybody. Being a little more targeted and thoughtful in what you say and how you say it. It's also important, and you see some things that other companies do. I'm not going to name names, but you also have to be empathetic. There's a part of this where empathy comes into play. Too many people are posting or emailing, doing things on social that is opportunistic. And while in the short term you can say, okay, I have a business or I have an opportunity and this is great for me now. If you appear too opportunistic and less empathetic, it also probably has the opposite effect. And so we're all figuring this out. Right? I mean, nobody has a playbook for pandemics and investing in a time of pandemics, and so we're looking at those things. I think to your point, you know, having been here for 4 weeks, I crave being on a plane and I crave social interaction. So I don't know that those things necessarily are going away, but I'm going to guess that they're going to be less frequent, and I think there's going to be a large part of society that's going to think twice before they do a lot of these things. Or there's just.
Are you going to travel less, Jason? Thought. Is that what you're telling me? You're going to travel less?
Probably not, but you know, you never know, right? And I think people will travel. We will still have conferences. We will still have one-on-ones and non-deal roadshows. But I think what we will have is people thinking about making sure that they have a virtual strategy to go along with that face-to-face strategy, whether it's companies doing fundraising or non-deal roadshows or the conference circuit. Yeah, I think you probably will see a little bit less of that, and I think you will see more resource diverted to that virtual, which isn't a bad thing, right? For every virtual conference we do, the carbon footprint impact of that is significant, and maybe it took this pandemic to get people to think about it. You know, getting on a plane is bad for the environment. No two ways about it. And so if you can offset that a little with virtual, maybe you'll see more of that in the future.
So that was an unplanned segue, but I want to ask you, there are some businesses that are actually going to do really well because of today's environment and what's going to happen over the next 6 to 18 months. Who knows? But
like Amazon, I can't get a delivery until April 22nd.
Me too. I'm waiting for a new microphone. I'm waiting for a headset and everything. But we're making do. What you realize is when you comb through your desk and you got all these things like these microphones and stuff, they're actually pretty good. The ones Apple gives you, I'm not plugging Apple, but or maybe I am. You know what? Good job, Apple. Thank you for giving me these buds. They work great. But there are other businesses that are going to do really well as a result of this. And I'm wondering if you have any keen insights into those that might do well. And I might challenge you further. Is there anything in the financial sector that actually might do well as a result of this?
You kind of caught me off guard. So
I know I do.
I worry about banks, and
Okay.
I'm just a worrier, right? There's an old saying that if you owe the bank $1 million, you've got a problem. If you owe the bank $1 billion, the bank's got a problem. And so I think, governments are trying to mitigate some of the issues, but let's face it, there was a credit issue before this started, and it's just going to be harder and harder, whether it's auto loans, credit cards, commercial real estate, right? I mean, we're all going to be stretched, and debt is going to be a problem. What I do think is interesting is some of the fintech financials, the non-bank financials, are going to be well positioned. Certainly, everybody talks Gen X, and I don't want to be Gen X-y, but they always tend to find solutions maybe a little faster than the rest of us. And so some of the non-bank financials or the fintechs companies that are going to help, whether it's student loan refinancing or other parts of that market, I think could be well positioned. But I think, anybody that's dealing in online retail right now is probably having a great time. I know in my house there's a lot of shop therapy going on, and things are still being delivered. But I think it's too early to tell. There's you'd like to say, in north of the border where you guys are, some of the mining and resource companies might be well positioned. Certainly, if you're a gold miner, that seems to be, if you can get financing.
Well, that's the big one. It's a capital intensive business. And
right.
What's the capital flow going to look like once we kind of get through what's been committed over the last few months? Because we're still seeing capital flow right now, but once the institutions take a more cautious approach and they pull back and wait it out, where does that leave? Because the retail investors are probably the hardest hit right now. They're just watching their stock portfolios get destroyed. And then
what I worry about in the junior mining space and the micro cap space generally is, companies are when companies are forced into a position where they need money and where capital isn't flowing as freely as it should traditionally, you'll find there are people that prey on the needs of those types of companies, and you start seeing some really bad financings, death spiral financings, bad pipe transactions, and then it all kind of feeds on itself, right? And so these companies are desperate to stay afloat, and so they take a bad round of financing, and then it just kind of feeds on itself, and it just gets worse and worse. And so I think it's important for guys like us to be kind of out there. We've seen this. We see what goes on, and I think we have an obligation to help our companies navigate this, understanding it's hard. If you need financing, you need financing, but you really do have to think twice sometimes before you take some money that's too good to be true.
And so this is another unintended segue. Beautiful job, Jason. You mentioned distressed financings. Well, the cannabis industry has seen a few of these in the last few months. As that industry has been going through a bit of some growing pains. But now we're hearing we won't know until financials are released a few months down the road, but we're hearing that numbers are looking good, sales are up, that in the US and in Canada, this cannabis delivery or distribution and retail is being protected as an essential service. So you tell me what you think, and maybe if you're seeing anything from the US MSO side, but perhaps this is one of the sectors that's going to end up actually having a bit of a lift through all this, no pun intended.
Yeah, no, I think it will. Yeah, right. I mean, where do people go when you're holed up in your house for weeks on end with nothing to do? I mean, I'd be silly about it, but that's one of those things. Alcohol, I'm sure, those businesses are doing well. Although the New York Post ran an article that the mafia is not doing well in the epidemic because the illegal gambling trade, not so much. No sports.
Wow.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think they'll probably do better. Although, today, not good news for the cannabis space is our governor, who's been a leader and on the forefront of this, Governor Cuomo, actually said today that cannabis legalization in New York is probably off the table now this year just because there's so many other important issues. So I know New York was one of those states that we were all hopeful about. I think that has to be, the unintended consequence of being at the epicenter of coronavirus and a significant budget shortfall in New York is that cannabis legalization is not going to happen.
I mean, you can probably echo this sentiment. And I mean, in Canada, the conservative leadership race has basically been put on pause. You guys have a federal election coming up in November. And what were once wedge issues, things that maybe people could get votes with, like cannabis legislation, are now probably being completely thrown out the window, where this may just come down to, we think this guy mismanaged this whole situation. We need a new person, and everything else is less important. And are you going to see the election being not polarizing? And do you even see it happening within the timeline that it's set to be done? Are we at risk of democracy being delayed as a result of this?
Well, I don't see us not having an election. So,
okay.
I mean, that seems to me to be kind of banana republic-y. That somebody's just going to say, forget it, we're not going to have an election. We're not Russia. What is interesting, though, is that you might see kind of a British-style election where everything is just very condensed into a short period of time. The one thing about the United States that I think universally, Democrat or Republican, we can all agree on is that the election season is just too damn long. I mean, it basically starts a year after the guy's elected. It's just a constant stream of presidential elections. So I don't know necessarily that it would be a bad thing if it was condensed. Maybe it would make us all a little more sane. It's too far away. Who knows what's going to happen? I think, if this drags on for a long period of time, this will be the issue, how it was dealt with and the unintended consequences from an economic standpoint. I mean, if you see mass layoffs and mass unemployment, 20-30% unemployment around election time, it's going to be hard not for that to be an issue, right? You're not going to be looking at cannabis legalization or other things because people vote with their pocketbooks. But I think, it's too soon. It's too soon to say. It's definitely, New York, we already pushed back our primary. And so you're seeing other states push their primaries back. We will have a federal election on time. How we do it, I don't know. Maybe we go online voting. It would be great if we could figure that out.
Yeah, of all the things that we should be able to bring into the 21st century, I mean, voting from your chair has to be one of them. Yeah. It's got to be verification and all that good stuff. But man, it's you want to get out the vote.
Yeah, and look, we're polarized. I mean, it's 51-49, 50-50, 48-52. If you were to not have an election, that would not go over well with 50% of the electorate, right? And I don't think that you could really do that.
Maybe more, yeah.
And I just don't see it. Theoretically, rioting in the streets, right?
No.
It would be deemed by 50% as essential because we're in these crazy times. It would be deemed by the other 50% to be a power grab and kind of an autocratic, non-American, non-democratic power grab. But anyway.
Make a bad situation worse. I want to ask you, because this is a good question, and I think we're going to ask all our guests. In today's digital day and age, where do you get your news? Where do you dial in every morning? at lunch on your coffee break. Where do you get your information from? Because I find like right now, it's been really tough to get solid information, non-biased information about what's going on.
So I have the same morning routine. So this is probably boring, but I read like 5 things every morning. So I do start with the New York Times. I'm a born and bred New Yorker, and the New York Times is the paper of record. I'm sure some people think it's, fake news, but it still is the paper of record. I do like to balance that. I read the FT every morning. I find that to be the better of the financial news publications, and it's got some more worldly content to it. I read The Independent in the UK. I like to get the UK perspective on things. So I read it's the New York Times first, then the FT, then the Independent, and then I get 2 daily alerts. I look at the Economist Daily Alert as to what they're sending me. And then I'm a bit of a political science, history, politics junkie. So I get the Foreign Affairs Magazine alert. And so I read those 5 things in the morning. During the day, I intersperse that with, looking whether what's on Yahoo Finance or, I'll read some of the New York Post is always good for a chuckle. So I'll look at that every once in a while. I tend not to get my news on TV anymore.
No.
I just, I don't find any of it, whatever channel it is, it all seems silly to me. So I try to read things that I find somewhat unbiased, somewhat not kind of in the weeds of the propaganda within this country. I try to get most of our business, 70% of our business is international. So I think it's important to get, the view from around the world as well.
Yeah, no. So you didn't mention TMZ or BuzzFeed or Breitbart. So I trust you. I trust what you're doing. Yeah, I've gotten in the bad habit of flicking over my phone to the Apple, news feed, which it's mostly local, but
yeah.
You'll sometimes hop into a good story from the Atlantic, which has been, I find, a very good source of trying to make sense of what's happening with the virus. I feel like our local news in Canada has actually done a pretty good job. Both the Post Media and CBC guys, I think there's been some really good reporting. And, kudos to them for doing a good job. Keeping it, this whole story doesn't need political bias. It's just, what do we have to do to stay alive and help each other? And I think that ethic has been promoted through the, and no, fear-mongering stuff either. Just here's facts and how we're going to deal with this.
That's why I watch the Governor Cuomo briefing every day, quite honestly, because it is just facts, and it gives me kind of what I need to know from a New York perspective as to what's going on with the virus specifically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the further you can stay away from right or left-leaning news publications that have an agenda every time they say anything, the better. But we don't have to go down that road. No. And also, I'll put this out there. Talking to other people, like people in different geographies, such as yourself. We've had guests on the show, people in Los Angeles, Vancouver, the prairies. I had someone on the show yesterday from Victoria. Just talking to people in different neighborhoods and understanding what is happening in their own backyard has been very grounding to see, like, we're all going through this together. Everyone's being pretty responsible, I would say. I'm getting the sense that people have now taken this very seriously. And then if I do have to go to the grocery store, there's now protocol in place. So I think we've done a good job now trying to respond to this thing the best way we can through, here's the plug, social distancing, flattening the curve, and being good citizens. Because that one person who has the infection and they get out there unknowingly, we've seen the charts. It's not good.
Yep.
That's your PSA for the day. The OTC markets curve. Actually, I'm going to encourage people to ask us questions below. If you can ask us questions, there's a question button. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know more about your thoughts or what you're doing to get news or just your thoughts on the markets. Ask Jay a question. He's in New York. You guys are a public company. You run a public company. You're listed on OTCQX. How has the dynamic of communicating been for you as a director of a public company?
This is one of those interesting times where communicate. I've said it all my career when you advise other companies that when times are tough, you have to communicate almost more. There are a lot of companies that will stick their head in the sand and say, oh, well, when times are better, we'll start talking. You can't really do that. And so, yes, we're a public company, but we're also, what we call a Reg SCI entity down here, right? So we're systemically important to the market infrastructure. So we, like I said earlier, right, we have to stay open. We're regulated, and so have to be up and running and can't have downtime, and we operate a securities market. So we are communicating as much as we can. I'm our CEO. I report to the CEO. He meets with the board, or is at least speaking to the board on a regular basis to let them know what's going on. But at the end of the day, you gotta. It's business. It's business as usual as much as it can be business as usual. It's making sure your people are safe, but once that's done and you've crossed that hurdle, it's keeping your business up and running. It's communicating with your clients. It's communicating with your stakeholders. It's communicating with your shareholders, and all of that is stuff you're doing in good times, and you just have to kind of do it during these times, and sometimes a little more than normal. But that's what we're doing the way any other good public company should be doing.
Oh, here's a question. Is the CSE considering suspending short interest? I assume short trading. No immediate comment on that other than probably no. I mean,
there was an announcement today that Euronext was contemplating. I didn't get to get to the full story as to whether or not they were going to suspend it on the downtick, right, or what.
That's an industry collaboration. If that were to happen, it wouldn't be one exchange, to my knowledge. It would be, you'd have to have the CSA involved and other parties involved, and it would have to be across the board, I assume. And
I also don't know what you're trying to solve for by doing
that. That's a good question. So
right?
yeah,
I mean, for every short, there's a long. Somebody's taking the opposite side. So for efficient markets to function, shorting does play an important role in that. Obviously, rules around naked shorting and all those things, I'm not advocating at all for that. Those rules are in place and should continue to be in place. But efficient market theory would tell you that, having buyers and sellers or people taking different views kind of gets you to the true valuation of a security. I don't know that blanket cutting off short selling does anything other than.
Yeah, liquidity is a key ingredient to maintaining some form of orderly market right now, and to throw anything out of whack that's currently part of the standard, mix, it could cause unintended consequences as well. So there's issues there that need to be thought through. But I think what we do understand is that there are a lot of people who are feeling the pain right now, and however we can help, we'll listen. So we're always open for ideas. And for that, I mean, if you have commentary, both here, us, or info@thecse.com. And, that's where we want to hear from you as well.
Okay, now, I think the CEOs of New York and NASDAQ and us have been really good at communicating to the public the importance of keeping markets open. There was a lot of talk early on that should we shut the markets down? Should we limit trading hours? Should we do all of these things? And I give kudos to all of them for really putting out a good message as to why it's important to keep markets up and running, and how important that is for the economy, for investors, even for just feeling good, whether the markets are up or down, but for our own sanity.
Yeah, I mean, in Canada, it's basically the stock markets and Tim Hortons. If you can keep those things going, people have some sort of a foundation for existence. But
does Tim Hortons deliver?
No, I don't think so. They got drive-through.
Okay.
We had another question here, which was just, can you talk more about the type audience sizes that you get at the virtual investment conferences? How many people typically come into a session? I know we did one back in October, and the numbers were pretty big, but do you have a benchmark there that you can share?
You know, a lot of it depends on the company. It depends on the sector. You know, we did a cannabis event. CSE, OTC Markets did a cannabis event. You know, we had thousands of investors come in. I think the number is, you know, 10,000 plus were listening in to that conference. We did a U.S. community banks event recently, 2-3 weeks ago. You know, didn't have the cannabis numbers, but for any given, you know, U.S. community bank that was presenting, they probably had 50 to 100 people listen in. What's interesting about the virtual investor conference events is that while it's live, and so you get that live group, 50 to 100, they sit out there for 90 days. So what you tend to see is the majority of people that listen in are people that aren't able to do it live, but will log on to it after and listen to the presentation after the fact. So you're getting anywhere from 50 to 60% of the viewership post-event because people couldn't log in for whatever reason and do it live. From an issuer perspective, it's nice because we give you all of the details of who's logged in. Are they retail? Are they institutional? Here's their email address. And so as you're building out your shareholder base and your CRM, you're capturing those new investors. And they become part of your outreach, your continual outreach, whether it's email or social media.
Yeah. Now, we had another question here, which was part of, we're going to talk about our business for a sec. Can you guys hear me okay? My phones are about to cut out here. Big fan of both groups and was interested to see if any discussions of including an automatic listing to the OTC when companies list on the CSE. That would be additional value. There is an answer to that, and I'll let Jay jump into it just because he's got swamp headphones.
So there's no automatic, but they're certainly streamlined, and the two groups work very closely together and continue to work very closely together. Obviously, the CSE becomes the primary market, and so you have to meet all the regulatory requirements in Canada. Issuers, once they've met those requirements, though, it's relatively simple for getting admittance onto one of the OTC markets, whether it's QB or QX, depending on your size. And we've streamlined a lot of that information flow. So certainly my team and James's team are talking regularly. You know, we have some additional requirements that we ask for, but I mean, a majority of companies, once they're up and running, kind of come south, and the process doesn't take that long.
No, it's been a good relationship. So yeah, just to reiterate, when you come to our market, you make CSE your home market, then we make it as easy as humanly possible to integrate into the OTC market through an introduction to their services, introduction to DTC eligibility, and getting everything ready and set your roadmap for that US exposure as soon as you hit your listing at the CSE. Further question, issues are typically confused with the right approach is to list. This is, okay, yeah. So yeah, thank you for that, Christian. Any other questions? Because I've got, we're getting to almost 45 minutes with Jason here. I don't want to take too much of his time, but any other questions or comments about what we're doing at the exchanges or what we can do to help you or what kind of content, or even just to know, want to ask Jason about how much he's going to miss the Mets this summer because they may not play.
It's killing me.
Yeah, I know. I've got my little Blue Jay behind me, and if anyone can tell me what player that is, I'll give you a shout out. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer. We still got some time ahead of us to figure this all out, and I don't think this will be our last conversation, Jason. I think things will continue to evolve, and we'll have to keep leaning on each other, helping each other, and learning from each other as this whole thing continues to develop. And most importantly, just my heart to you guys in New York. You guys have had. I've been in New York a few times, and I could see how this is very challenging. It's very dense. People there are always bumping up against each other. Everything is, yeah, no way, Jose.
You know, New York is a tough place, and we are known around the world as kind of tough, nasty, ornery people. But we've been through some tough times, 9/11, certainly, even the financial crisis, because we're such a large financial center. What's incredible to me is, as nasty as we might be or perceived to be, when things like this happen, we all come together. which is nice, right? It makes you feel good. Even, you know, you walk, I go out, we are allowed out of our house, so I do go out for exercise. People are nicer to each other, and people acknowledge one another, and people are helping one another. So we'll get through this. We get through everything else. And
you guys in New York don't hug each other anyway, so that's not going to be a problem. And
yeah, exactly. We just don't hit each other as much as we used to and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So you'll be good. You'll be good. All right. Well, keep surviving, keep thriving. Good luck to everyone in your neighborhood, and all the best. Thanks for joining us today for this special episode. This will be broadcast on #finance. We're coming to you again tomorrow on Instagram Live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with Tracy Costa. That's going to be hosted by Grace Bedota, and we'll be talking to Tracy about her company Peekaboo Beans. So once again, thanks for watching. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you to your team for setting this up. And until next time, we're signing off. Thanks for watching, and keep safe out there. Thank you.
Thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.